Welcome and thanks for tuning into my space here at the Quiet Leadership Lab. You could have gone anywhere else, but you are here, and I don't take that lightly. My name is Shirley Brooks. I am future of Work Strategist and founder of YSWS Growth Firm. And I work with quiet, discerning leaders, especially women, who are holding more than their title, their pay, or their visibility suggest. And if you've ever been the one that people call when things are messy, but not always the one they call a leader, this podcast is for you. If you've ever left a meeting thinking of the right thing to say after it was over, this podcast is for you. If you've ever quietly fixed something that would have cost your team or your client a lot of money or reputation, and no one really saw it, this podcast is for you. Today, though, and before we get into today, I would like to acknowledge that on my first podcast on this channel, and this might still very well be happening right now, but I'm not going to re-record because done is better than perfect for me. And I am not going to delay my message for mess. Mess being that the first episode I was recording, I have a brand new camera and all that jazz. But for some reason, it looks like I'm looking over here to talk to you. What I hope today is right here. If it's not, I'm sorry. We are going to keep working on it. But the podcast is worth listening to. Just don't look because I'm not looking at you. Anyway, today I want to walk you through a really short 5-slide framework on the strengths of quiet leadership and what those strengths are and what they produce for organizations and why they are so often overlooked. So I'm going to pause right here, share my screen, and we will get started. And just know that if you are listening, I will drop the link for this deck in the, what's that thing called? In the show notes, in the description. And that way you'll have a visual of this when you have time to come back and watch. But listening is just as good for now. It's just I'm the kind of person that I like to have, if I can, tools and guides available in case you want them. So here's the first one. All right, give me a sec. All right, and we are back. Let's get started. So we are at the first slide, key strengths of quiet leadership. And you can see that big idea there. What I really want to name here is that quiet leadership creates value through discernment, stability, and prevention, not just visibility. And I think that matters because a lot of workplaces are set on recognizing the loudest form of leadership first. They notice who speaks quickly, who sounds certain, and who has presence in the most obvious way. But they often miss the leader who is reflective, preventative, and low drama, even when that person is helping create fewer errors, strong trust, and tend to have better judgment across the team. So when I say quiet value gap, what I mean is this: the value is real, the outcomes are real, but the impact often gets overlooked because it doesn't perform for attention. And that's really what the whole deck here is about today. It's about making that value easier to see, easier for you to see as a quiet leader because we tend to overlook that even for ourselves, and easier for your peers and leaders to see as well, because they tend to overlook it or misread it. Okay, so on this slide, I am breaking down what quiet leaders usually do unusually well because we do. The first one is deep listening. And I don't mean just being nice or being attentive. I mean the ability to catch what is being said, what is being avoided, and what is quietly building under the surface before it turns into conflict or confusion. The second thing is that we are thoughtful with our judgment. Quiet leaders are often the people testing assumptions in their head, noticing this like dependencies, and asking whether a decision is actually strong before it hardens into action. And then there's also our preventative thinking. And this one is big. This is where we catch risk early and prevent chaos and rework and even reputation damage before the problem becomes fully visible, which leads to our other good quality. We are calm under pressure. Instead of escalating the stress in the room, we help steady it. We improve execution quality because we don't let pressure automatically turn into panic. And then there's trust building. Quiet leaders like us often build credibility through our consistency, through our follow through and respect, not through performance, but through reliability. And finally, one of our many unusually well things that we do is we empower others. We make room for other people to contribute, which builds ownership and strengthens the team instead of making everything dependent on one dominant voice. And I will say, because we are so good at the empowering others, sometimes leadership can look at that as we aren't doing anything, because in our strong desire to help others and empower others, we'll say things like the team did this, or, but we don't use enough I statements. I do address I statements in the prior podcast, and I will also talk about some more of those as time goes by. But I just wanted to kind of key in on that. Empowering others can work for us and against us. Doesn't mean we shouldn't empower, doesn't mean we shouldn't uplift, doesn't mean we shouldn't collaborate and elevate, but we also have to balance it so that it is known what our contribution is to the overall project, right? So, in general, though, when you look at all of this together, this is not passive leadership. It is leadership expressed through steadiness, thoughtfulness, and protective value. If you're following along, we're going to the third slide, which is strength and the outcome of that strength. So with this slide, we connect those strengths to business outcomes. So everything I just told you that we are good at, the deep listening, etc., we're going to connect that to an outcome, and also kind of look at how that can be measured. This is important for you to try, like, make note of these kinds of things as I tell you them. And if you have a chance to actually look at the slide, make note of that too, because you can use this for yourself when you're doing your own communications about what you do, or in a performance evaluation, or if you have a quiet leader and you're doing a performance evaluation. This is a good way where you can kind of pull these things in to show that you value them, but also be able to communicate and look for that value, right? So again, I want to connect the strengths to the business outcomes because this is usually the missing piece. A lot of quiet leaders know they add value, but we describe it in a way that sounds personal instead of strategic. And that's the reason why I made this particular slide. So this slide is where we connect those strengths to business outcomes, because this is usually the missing piece. A lot of quiet leaders know they add value, but we tend to describe it in a way that sounds personal instead of strategic. So this slide does the translation for us. If someone is strong at listening and issue detection, that leads to better alignment and fewer misreads. And if someone brings thoughtful judgment, that leads to lower correction cost and better decisions. If someone is preventative in how they think, that means fewer outages, fewer misses, and fewer surprises because the risk was addressed earlier. If someone stays calm under pressure, the payoff is less panic and steadier execution in crisis. If we build trust well, the result is higher retention and better cooperation. And if we empower others well, the result is more initiative, stronger bench strength, and more team capability over time. What I also love about this slide is that it reminds us, like I said earlier, that these different qualities are actually measurable. We can look at things like rework, decision reversals, error rates, incidents prevented, engagement, retention, peer feedback, successor readiness, and idea adoption, so that it's not some vague conversation about leadership style. These are actually business outcomes that managers already care about. Slide 4, we're going into now. This is one of the next to last slides. Told you I'd try to make this fast. So here we're talking about how we translate those things into promotion criteria. So this is probably the one that hits the hardest because it shows exactly how quiet leadership gets misread inside promotion systems. If promotions reward optics only, then listening gets misread as passivity, restraint gets tagged as low presence, and prevention gets ignored because no visible crisis happened, and the team first language gets misread as weak ownership. I have seen this happen for myself and my clients. And it's a really important point. A person can be creating tremendous value and still look visible in a system that only rewards what is dramatic, fast, and obvious. That's why I really want to slow down on the key line in this slide. Quiet leadership should not be evaluated as low visibility. It should be evaluated as high judgment, high trust, and high preventative value. And I really think this slide does something else really useful because it translates quiet strengths into promotable language. So instead of just calling someone thoughtful, we call that strategic judgment because they can see second order effects. Instead of saying they are dependable, we can call that execution excellence because they reduce rework and improve quality. Preventative thinking becomes risk leadership because that catch it, they we tend to catch issues before they become losses. And the way that we grow trust and develop others becomes talent leadership, and our ability to hold context across teams becomes enterprise thinking. So then, if you look at the last part of this deck, it's the evidence that can be documented so that you can use this to create the criteria for promotion with quiet leaders. And for yourself, when you are self evaluating for your performance evals, you can look at problems prevented early. That's evidence of strategic judgment. Decisions improved by your questions. That's evidence of execution excellence. Processes stabilized or redesigned. Evidence of risk leadership. People developed or retained. That is evidence of talent leadership. And revenue, quality time, and risk protected is evidence of enterprise thinking. And that is the shift. So you're not changing the work. You're changing the language around the work so the value becomes visible. And I hope you take this to heart because I wish I would have had this when I was in corporate, okay? But I went through what I went through for you, so I hope you use it. All right, so let's talk about the reframe with quiet leadership because quiet leadership is not low impact. This last slide brings everything together in a way that you can kind of use it for your reframes. Quiet leadership, like I said, is not low impact. It is high value leadership expressed through discernment, trust, and prevention. And I think the most important sentence on this slide is this one. The real issue is not capability. It is whether the organization knows how to recognize value that does not perform for attention. That to me is the heart of the whole conversation because so many people have internalized the idea that if leadership doesn't look theatrical, maybe it doesn't count. But this slide makes the argument very clearly that the issue is not a lack of value. The issue is a lack of recognition within systems that should know how to measure it. And that's why the three headlines here work so well. We are discerning, we are stable, and our strengths are discernment, stability, and prevention. And if you want to look at how to promote us, if you want to look at your qualities for being promotable, those signals are our judgment, our trust building, our systems, our how we manage risk or prevent errors and things like that, and how we help with retaining talent. And the core message I want everyone to get from this is that it is important to reward durable value, not just performance theater. That is a space that I feel like we need to move into so that all forms of leadership feel valued. There's nothing wrong with the leader that is for lack of a better term, loud leader. But there has to be space for both of us, right? So really, that is what I want you to get, or what this deck is inviting you to do, is to reward the durable value and not just performance theater. If we want healthier organizations, stronger decisions, steadier teams, and better leadership pipelines, then we have to get better at seeing the forms of leadership that create durable value, even when they are not loud. And that is what quiet leadership offers. And that is why it deserves to be recognized more accurately. So if this resonated, the question isn't whether quiet leadership has value. The question is, whether we have built systems mature enough to recognize it. And then, as I said, how will we facilitate that? As the quiet leader, how will you facilitate that? As the executive or leader of a quiet leader, how will you facilitate that? That's the question I leave with you. But for now, just know that I'm grateful that you're here. And as a quiet leader, I want you to know that you are not imagining the weight you carry. You are not overreacting to what you've lived. And you are absolutely not the only one. You don't need to be a louder leader, but you do deserve rooms, roles, and relationships that recognize what you see and what you hold. I hope I did do that with you today, and I thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you again soon.